So let me get back to the agenda for today. Digital assessment to meet the needs of the next decade. I think that's perhaps overpromising just slightly from my side, but I hope I can talk you through what we're doing and what we've seen in the past year and the kind of experiences that we have that Inspera has gained over the past year, of course, through working with our customers. So a little bit about who we are, which I started before. And Inspera Assessment works, as I said, with some awarding organizations. We've also worked with ministries of education in the past, but I think it's fair to say that the bulk of our experience comes from working with universities. As we are a Scandinavian company, as I said initially, we, of course, the main part of our customers are in Scandinavia, so University of Bergen, we have NTNU, large universities, Oslo, Uppsala, all Swedish and Norwegian universities, quite large, very research-focused universities. That seems to be where our DNA, for some reason, takes us. We seem to fit well with those universities. However, of course, recent years, we've started, in the last 3 or 4 years, we've started expanding across in a very slow manner, if you like, as universities outside of Scandinavia started picking up on digital assessment and digital examinations. Now, the point about this, of course, to raise or to mention is that whilst universities globally, Scandinavian or not Scandinavian across, have been using, I think, a portfolio of different solutions for years to do various things that were online or digital with respect to assessment. So quizzes, different tests, formative assessments, all of that, of course, universities have used a whole range of different solutions for quite a long time, perhaps even 20 years, if we look back on the history on, for example, learning management systems and virtual learning environments that have all offered in the past also some functionality for, shall we say, quizzes or assessments. However, in Scandinavia, back in 2013, 2012, we started really kind of a push for digitization of what we would call high stakes exams, so formal end of year examinations. And that's where Inspera was founded, really working closely with universities to figure out how to solve that problem, that particular exam day. How do we get that right with digitization, and how do we make sure that we offer support for not just the security, shall we say, the logistics, all of the infrastructure problems around having, let's say, 2,000 candidates sit an exam on exam day, high stakes, with the closed book type examination supported by technology. How do we also support the entire process around exams, a very formal process, from content production, if you like, i.e. writing up exam papers, approving exam papers, all the way through to marking, with, of course, the involvement of external auditors, examiners, exam boards, etc. So that movement from, shall we say, using a little bit of technology around assessment in universities to full-scale high-stakes exams digitized across all of the academic year for all of the student cohort, that I think is fair to say we were a little bit pioneering in Scandinavia in 2013-14. We saw a little bit of pickup on that. From 2016, 2017, outside of Scandinavia. And then, of course, with the pandemic last year, that really scaled. And that's I'm going to talk about today. I think my colleague this morning or earlier today has given you a bit of a lightning demo. And John, for those of you who attended that, focused quite a lot on particular aspects of our platform. We do have now an end-to-end platform, of course, and as we claim, of course, for all of your tests and assessments. Sometimes there are, of course, outliers that are very difficult to digitalize, very complicated math exams. Things like that are very difficult to put on screen. But what we say when we look across our customers is that we support 80 to 90% of all their examination types or assessment forms, and 10 to 20% has to still be, should we say, delivered on paper, where we, of course, have inbuilt integrations to third parties, party software and applications such as scanning solutions, etc., so that everything at the end can be digitalized. But our should we say, our value proposition is really that whatever type of exam is going on in a higher education institution, we are able to support that either 100% digitally, or should we say 50-60% digitally. So we have here a platform that supports all the processes through the exam, as I said before, from authoring to delivery, exam day, and marking. We have, of course, also very much as a response to the pandemic, developed support for remote and offline options. So take an exam anywhere, at any point, any place, under any conditions, any Wi-Fi, any browser, any device. We are able to support that. We aim to be agnostic in terms of exam surroundings, if you like. So John was showing you today earlier our solutions for remote invigilation, whether record and review or actual live invigilation. And of course, we pride ourselves on having a very intuitive test taker experience, because that kind of exam scenario requires a lot of simultaneous log on by a lot of candidates who have maybe not been trained very much into the system. So the system has to be extremely intuitive to be able to process all of those candidates through exam day, where nerves are really sitting, are really high, if you like. If I just dive in a little bit to the process itself, the assessment cycle, if you like, the workflow surrounding, this is what Inspera offers. Of course, planning and scheduling assessments, designing exam papers, all of the functionality required for content production, including more experimental type of assessment designs or items, if you like, exam papers, delivering online and offline tests with a real-time monitor that supports the university administration and the exams office to make sure that all issues are captured, that students are helped through whatever issue they have on exam day. Very important for a smooth exam day experience. Marking, of course, as I said before, external examiners, very many different workflows in higher education. Every assessment needs a different workflow almost, it seems, or every college, every faculty has a different type of marking and quality assurance process there. And of course, that needs flexibility with respect to the solution. And of course, feedback. Now, one of the things I think is true about higher education when you look through, I think across every university we work with, regardless of the location, geography is, and I think this is true for higher education much more so than for any other, if you like, educational segment, feedback is such an important part of assessments. Whether assessments are high-stakes exams or whether they are coursework or formative assessments, feedback stands as one of the main, should we say, distinguishing requirements for higher education. And there's a lot of need for feedback all the way through, because as I will come back to, assessments are becoming more and more integrated into the everyday learning and teaching activities going on at the universities. So that was enough about Inspera, and I need to be mindful of time. So let me get on to the, should we say, the experiences that we made over the past year, where a lot of our customers and a lot of institutions, particularly universities across the globe, have been struggling quite a lot to, should we say, keep the exams operations running under very, very difficult circumstances. And there's been a lot of experimentation out there. And I'll just give you a little bit of insight into what we've seen with our customers and the choices that they've made. So before the pandemic, we would say that across the globe, as I said before, very few institutions were really digital around exams. In Scandinavia, we were, and I don't mean to pride myself in Scandinavia. I just have to say that's the reality we live in. It's a national project. Norway, Sweden, it's backed by the government. There are public digitalization strategies going on since 2012, 2013 to really push for digitalization of exams across all of the higher education sector. So we've been there working in this domain for some time, but across the globe, I don't think that many universities really had a strategy and a policy and the infrastructure and the processes, nor the tools, of course, to support digital exams on final exam day. So that was before the pandemic. After or during the pandemic, what we saw was all of a sudden, all of these institutions that have quite a big exam operations, I don't think one should underestimate what goes on in universities. the resources, the money, the people, the time, the processes, the policies, the legislation, the information to students, all of that goes on in universities to support the very, should we say, important or life-changing in some aspects event, which is exam for candidates. It's a big machine, and that was all of a sudden disrupted for universities when the pandemic hit, and they could no longer put 3,000 candidates into the exam hall, as they've always done, to write up an exam paper by hand. So universities started struggling with following two different strategies to meet the problems around the pandemic. One, which I'm showing you here on the screen, was universities started saying we need to support high stakes exams, closed book exams, just the type of exams we've always done. Candidates have no access to any material. We can control what they're seeing. We need to support that, but we cannot bring them into campus. So we have to find a tool to allow them to do that from home. So remote proctoring, online invigilation, whatever you call it, became, should we say, a really big, there was a really very, very high voice and kind of demand from our customers to say, please fix this for us now. We don't have time, we have a month or so. All of our exams are in danger, please help us fix that. So, of course, Inspera, as my colleague John presented earlier on today, started developing a solution for remote proctoring, whether record and review or whether live monitoring, let candidates take their exam, closed book, high stakes exams from home or from wherever they are without having to take them in to campus. The other strategy that we saw across driving universities' responses, of course, was universities saying, no, we cannot do remote proctoring because it's too invasive on candidates. We don't have the technology. We don't know how this is going to work. We need to do something else, and we have to leave the high stakes exam. We need to start looking into redesigning our assessments to let them be open book, where we do not have to monitor our candidates. They have to be longer, perhaps in the duration, but we need to change the content of the exam paper so that the assessment format fits the delivery scenario, and candidates will have no benefit, for example, from getting access to Google or to their local files or to talking to each other and things like that. So that was the two different, shall we say, streams, and we're still seeing those two streams today, and we're seeing policies being remade at universities. We're seeing universities struggling with understanding whether they need to combine the two or whether we should all just close our eyes and hope that when the pandemic is completely over, we can go back in exam halls and pick up where we left. So what we're seeing as a result of these two, shall we say, crisis responses from university with respect to their exam operations, which again, of course, is tied to revenue for universities, getting students through, letting them pass their admissions test, keeping the machine running that is higher education, or the business, if you like, of higher education. What we're seeing as a result of all of this is it's a new, should we say, it's blurring the lines between formative and summative assessment. And this is a trend that we've seen for many years in higher education. It's been an aspiration, but I think few universities have really managed to get it to really disrupt the exams office, if you like. It's such a well-known institution, exam day. But I think that's what we're seeing, that universities are now taking with them from the pandemic. All right, we needed to change quickly, we can change, and this is how we're going to change in the future as we go. This is a very, should we say, controversial kind of categorization of different assessment formats, and I'm sure we could discuss for days whether this is right, but please allow me some simplification just for the sake of this discussion. We have, typically for universities, we have 3 types of assessments being mentioned and talked about. Formative assessment. Assessments are part of teaching and learning. It's teacher managed completely. There's no formal grade or mark. It's all about feedback to candidates. The point of this is just to, should we say, to teach and to increase student learning. We have courseworks. Courseworks is quite a large part of credited work, credit-bearing work for higher education institutions. So it's essays that candidates submit through the course of the term. and with a percentage, of course, every mark on that coursework counts towards a percentage of their final degree on the course. It's all teacher managed. It's completely controlled between the teacher and the candidates. In most cases, there's still a lot of focus on feedback. But of course, again, this is about evaluating the candidates, but it's just managed by the teacher. And then we've had the end of year high stakes exams typically. Now, the purpose of that is evaluation of the candidates' learning outcomes, of course, not to learn or teach the candidates anything. It's institutionally managed. So it's the exams office running it, the registrar's department. It's surrounded by formalities, law, legislation, etc. It has a lot of external audits, a lot of control, benchmarking, Q&A processes around it. And it requires some grading explanations, if you like, in terms of feedback, but not really in-depth feedback. What we've seen, of course, is that universities throughout the years have always had, with these three types of assessment categories, kind of playing around in the institution in all sorts of materials and in, if you like, learning outcomes for the courses, curricular description. We've had these categories of assessments popping up, and what was always the ambition for universities in most cases was that they should really be aligned. We should align formative assessments, coursework, and the end of year exams, because that's good pedagogy. However, when we looked at the practice, actual reality in the practice there, it's been very difficult for universities to align them because they were just controlled and fed and born in different places within the institution. So this is what we were seeing as the, shall we say, the aspiration. And I think that across Scandinavia, across UK, quite a lot of universities across also, of course, the continent, European continent, this is the ambition. We need for every assessment that we do, whether formative coursework, whether high stakes exams, end of year, we should have this kind of assessment and feedbacks life cycle driving the process and driving the exams design or the assessment design. Lots of focus again on feedback, if you like, in this life cycle. However, one of the problems I think that then became obvious to universities when the pandemic hit was not just, let's say, the lack of alignment was one thing, but where the lack of alignment in the processes really came out was really evident in the platforms that the universities were using. So we would have the VLEs, virtual learning environments, or the learning management systems to the left here. This was something that teachers controlled with candidates. There was a lot of ways in which VLEs and learning management systems could be used to control coursework, but also formative assessments. Then we would have solutions as, for example, Inspera assessment, very exams oriented, high stakes exams, not managed by the individual teacher, but more in the hands of, if you like, the exams office, the administrative staff controlling exams, more focus on workflow and process support for controlling the formal gates around examinations. And finally, we would have something like a student information system, student record system, where everything that was a formal mark or formal grade would end up at the end of an assessment. So three different types of systems, if you like, in that landscape, and very little good integration, very little good overlap between these systems. What we did see, though, with the pandemic very, very quickly was, and we'd seen this kind of starting before the pandemic was, all right, now we need to do something to align technology and pedagogy with these three different types of assessment systems. So we need to integrate. And this is how we will do it. And this is what most of our customers did. We would have the VLE and the LMS, of course, still used by teachers and still controlled by teachers, but we would have an integration, LTI, single sign-on integration from Inspera assessment to the VLE so that students and teachers could still use Inspera and the functionality in there to at least align the look and feel and the experience around taking an assessment, taking it in Inspera, but through the VLE and through the LMS. And then we would have Inspera assessment standalone for end of year high stakes exams, and with results, of course, feeding back into the student record system. What then all of a sudden happened, of course, during the pandemic was, oh my goodness, we need to be able to do remote proctoring. That's what this symbol here illustrates. So the remote proctoring was plunked onto the formal exams at the beginning, because that was the immediate problem universities was trying to solve. But all of a sudden, of course, over here, we also started seeing, okay, we need to be able to even do something around courseworks where there is some kind of formality involved, and let students do that from home. And we might need to be able to do something with that proctoring online to also have that available for teachers and students. So what all of this meant was essentially what we've been really preoccupied with in Inspera was we came from having a, should we say, a very or more narrow focus of exam day, supporting that with a system, on-site exams, all the security, all the infrastructure, and all those requirements around exam day. All of a sudden, that was blown into pieces, and exam day was now not one thing, but basically maybe 1,000 different things, 1,000 different candidates taking exams from anywhere, from home, from wherever they had enough Wi-Fi to take the actual exam, wherever they could get a peace and quiet. Not all students have access to peace and quiet when they take the exams, mind you. We came from that scenario, from very kind of controlled exam day to let's get control over this, but it's happening in all different places and we don't have control. And that was the remote proctoring, to then beginning to think, okay, so if we can do that, now we really need to pick up on this no longer separation between formative, summative coursework, on-site closed book, or off-site closed book, or off-site not closed book, open book. Now we just need to be able to support assessments anywhere, anytime, and any type of security setting. So this is what we've been really involved in doing over the past year. As you can see, wherever you come from the VLE or directly from into Inspera assessment, get into Inspera and do an exam, and we would provide with you with the technology needed to actually do, to make sure that the candidates, wherever they are, take an assessment that is intuitive, simple, and secure. Formative coursework, formative, summative exams, all that should be taken in the same place by candidates, and we can support that. And when they get the feedback and the grades back to candidates, whether coursework, formative, or summative, it's in one place, and candidates know where that is. And we've worked very hard to be able to make that system accommodate basically that all of that release and feedback and grades can be controlled in Inspera assessment. Now, I think I've reached the end of this. I think I'm still good on time. I've said enough positive things about Inspera, and I think I might have 3 minutes left, perhaps, Brian, if there are any questions or any comments.
Excellent. Yes. Yes to all. I'm going to actually launch another poll so we can get some feedback from the group, just in terms of managing your assessments. So would you say your organization has a good handle on this right now? Could use some improvements, but you're working at it, really struggling with the management piece, or is this management piece just not a priority? And as that runs, I'll go ahead and ask a question that, I have 2 questions. I'll ask the first one. In terms of that VLE, LMS, Inspera alignment you've been going through, I'm just wondering if you could share any of the sort of hidden challenges that you didn't expect to see, and anything kind of surprise you in the way that that's gone. And in particular, I'm kind of wondering, you know, as assessments were already built, probably in the VLEs and the LMSs, did you get any kind of grumbling about, we've already got this, and now you're kind of coming in and overriding what we've done, the work we've already done?